not competing with another candidate. He's not attacking anyone. He doesn't have to anymore. So we saw, the negotiator side of Donald Trump come out, paid the president a very nice compliment, said he would seek his counsel. I think that's encouraging for many Americans who are out on the street protesting. He's not going to unite the country immediately. I'm not sure anything he does today would do that, but I do think it's giving a lot of people encouragement.
It's interesting, that whole idea of seeking counsel, because the word is that this president hasn't done that much, hasn't called up the former presidents and said, you're one of the only people alive who's been in my shoes. What would you do in this situation?
Right.
And former presidents have done that. And you also think about the very unique relationship of President Bush 41 and Bill Clinton, the man who deprived him of a second term. They became very close. I mean, you can imagine, perhaps, that might happen with these two.
I read a really, really nice letter from HW the other day to Clinton, and he left it on the desk when he got into office. And it really kind of gives you the chills. It makes you appreciate that transition.
I think, too, President-elect Trump can take a lot from President Obama in terms of coming to office with a majority in both houses of Congress. This is in 2008. President Obama entered with a majority in Congress, and he didn't establish the kinds of relationships, and I think he paid the price for that later when he tried to do things that he wanted to do. So if he wants to seek counsel that way, I think that's good advice.
I don't see Donald Trump doing that, making that mistake, but we will see. Right. Because you have to press the flesh, you have to get people in your office, you have to have lunch, you have to reach out, and we see him doing that in his business life. He seems to like working more than pretty much any other part of his life.
And
we
talking,
all, people are either like that or they're not. They either would rather be working than anything else, or they're people who would like to work and then be done for the day.
Right.
He seems like the former. Shelby, in terms of Congress, the meetings he had today, Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, what did you read in those tea leaves?
That'll be a really interesting dynamic, because it looks like the GOP is already starting to move on things like tax reform and some of the policies Donald Trump wants to implement. At the same time, some of Donald Trump's policies are a little controversial within the Republican Party, like his stance on trade and pulling out of NAFTA and withdrawing from TPP. So I think that, again, it was an encouraging sign to see them standing there and shaking hands. I thought it was funny when they went out on the balcony with Paul Ryan and Melania. Paul Ryan is actually showing him where things are in Washington. Yeah. He's literally saying, over there you see this and that.
You'll be living over there.
Right.
You'll take the oath of office here. I mean, but you have to get back. We're sort of, it's like a little bit of a La La Land moment today. Everyone's like, oh, and everything. And then everything was perfect.
Right.
And, and fairy tale, which we know it's not. But you think about the things that were said between these people. You think about Paul Ryan just a couple weeks ago saying, after the Access Hollywood tape, I cannot support that man. I can't go. And then today, he's sitting there with Brett Baier saying, wow, I was so impressed. This is a guy who wants to get down to work. I think a lot of normal people who aren't politicians look at this and go, what the heck is going on?
Happened? I totally agree. I think it's one of the most fascinating elements of this. And I was looking, a couple of weeks ago when a lot of these Republicans were starting to come back home, and we saw Donald Trump he got the support that he needed in the polls from Republicans. And so I think Republicans in Washington, though, they've been out of power for so long, so they are they're really excited, exactly. About this
Donald
opportunity.
Trump just gave them the best pre-Christmas gift he could ever give them.
How are you going to argue with the guy who won?
Especially for Paul Ryan, who's trying to be pushing this agenda, has faced this gridlock in Congress. This is welcome news for him.
But he voted for Donald Trump.
He was dissing him, though, just a couple weeks ago, so that, I think, if he lost, he could say, oh, I told you, I was never on board that.
very close throughout this whole entire year. We saw him today at the White House, so the rumor mill is
walking around the lawn with Dennis McDonough,
exactly.
who holds the chief of staff role right now, we should point out.
I think that's something that should not be ruled out. That's certainly a wise choice for Trump. And like you said, it's not a public position. It's the president's most trusted advisor. I think Treasury Secretary will be really interesting. Will he reward Steve Mnuchin, who worked for him and has been very loyal and was his finance chair? He has a finance background. He was an investment banker. People skeptical of Wall Street might be skeptical of that choice. Don't rule out Representative Jeb Hensarling of Texas, House Financial Services guy. He's an elected official. He's not someone from Wall Street, but he has a deep knowledge of that, and he wants to repeal Dodd-Frank. He's very much in support of a lot of these GOP policies, things that the Republicans have been trying to do with respect to financial reform. That'll be a fascinating pick. Some people think Carl Icahn, he might be a little too insider.
Well, what about Kellyanne Conway? Because she did such a fabulous job for him. And there were moments when you could see in events that were happening, you know, the fingerprints of Kellyanne Conway and the things that he was saying when the discipline kicked in. Some people are saying press secretary, even perhaps chief of staff for her.
She was the campaign manager, of course, but her real role in that campaign was being the public face of the campaign, being the messenger, and by
she
all
took
accounts,
the heat with those girls on The View. She took the heat in some very tough situations. Yes, she did.
By all accounts, she did a very difficult job very well. And so, communications director, press secretary, I think in a public role, being involved in messaging, I think is really her strength. She's also someone that has experience, of course, in polls and public opinion. Part of the presidency involves traveling around, using the bully pulpit, messaging, especially in the early stage. That's critical.
I think she'd be a great pick because Trump's already getting criticism for having a, quote, sausage fest of a cabinet. All these men, most of them are white, all of them are white. So I think she would be an incredible pick.
She's super smart, and she was great in the mix on the campaign. And I would expect her to get a fairly high-profile role here. So we will see. Ladies, thank you very much. Great to see you both.
It'll be interesting.
Shelby and Caitlin, actually don't go away. There's the president-elect, Donald Trump, and President Obama sat down at the White House. Another name being thrown around for possible Secretary of State is the former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton, who we've had as a guest on our shows many times. So what would President-elect Trump look for in a Secretary of State? Ambassador Bolton is joining us now from D.C. Ambassador, good to see you. Welcome.
I'm glad to be here.
So what do you think about that? Is that a role that you are up for, and have you talked to the Trump campaign about it?
No, and I think Governor Christie, after a hesitation, got the answer exactly right. Look, these are decisions that have to be made, and I think made quickly, but I think that process is beginning. I think Donald Trump really did focus on his election campaign, and while there's been a lot of talk about the work that the transition teams, both for Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, did before the election, more, I think, than in any prior presidential election, there's still a lot more to be done. So it's people should not necessarily be expecting announcements within the next 24 hours. I think it's very important to get these early personnel decisions right. And if that takes a few more days than the media expect, well, then so be it.
What do you believe will be the most pressing and immediate? Because he talked about his priorities, and they are mostly domestic at this point in terms of the border, in terms of jobs, and in terms of health care. Those are the three things that he mentioned today as priorities. What would you advise him if you were to advise him? And I know you've spoken to him over the course of the campaign. He needs to make his top priority with regard to foreign policy.
Well, I think one of the characteristics about foreign policy that is distinct from domestic policy is that things happen in the rest of the world without anybody asking our permission. You know, reality tends to intrude. So if you look at both the imminent threats that the United States faces and the more longer-term strategic
politics. Iran just violated the terms of the nuclear deal. Speaking of that, according to a report from the United Nations, the Iranians exceeded a limit on their heavy water stockpile. Heavy water is used in nuclear reactors and can be used to create nuclear weapons. According to investigators, this is the second time that Iran has overstepped the limit. President-elect Trump has vowed to rip up that deal, and some of these transgressions seem to have gone without too much notice in Washington. Nigel Farage, one of Britain's most outspoken Brexit supporters and a prominent Donald Trump ally, now taking credit for President-elect Trump's success. Farage, the UK Independence Party leader, says Brexit helped push the populist movement as it swept across Europe and the US. And President-elect Trump strongly opposed the North American Free Trade Agreement, known as NAFTA, throughout his campaign. And now Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he is happy to talk about renegotiating that trade deal. Prime Minister Trudeau spoke to Mr. Trump this morning, congratulated him on a successful campaign, so thus begins their relationship. And firefighters today gave Trump Force One, as it's come to be known, a water salute as the president-elect left New York City for Washington. The firefighters tell Fox News this is something that they do to honor people, including foreign dignitaries and retiring military leaders. And this is quite an amazing moment on the tarmac today when that happened. And sneakers are getting political. Shoe brand New Balance sparked a backlash after the brand's spokesperson told a reporter, quote, "The Obama administration turned a deaf ear to us. And frankly, with President-elect Trump, we feel that things are going to move in the right direction." So there's that from New Balance. And the Boston-based company has long been against the Trans-Pacific Partnership, known as TPP. Some, however, have decided to burn their New Balance shoes in protest. And nearly every single pollster was wrong about Tuesday's results, with a couple of small exceptions. We're going to talk to one guest who's coming up who says that they weren't as wrong as everybody thinks. That's next. Also, President-elect Trump made immigration one of his key policy proposals. We look at his immigration plans and his first 100 days in office coming up. So it's all still sinking in, right? But many around the country, including a lot of the political pundits, never really expected to see the moment that we saw today at the White House. Mr. Trump sitting down with President Obama and discussing the transition of power. For months, pundits examined poll after poll. We all did, right? Looking at them time and time again. And the forecast always basically laid out one thing. Hillary Clinton ahead by between 2 and 4, 5 points, somewhere in that area. But as we all know, Donald Trump stunned everybody with an upset win on Tuesday night into the early morning hours on Wednesday. Pollsters around the nation scratching their heads, wondering how could it all have gone so wrong? But one pollster says that the polls weren't that wrong, and he is our friend Darren Shaw of Shaw Research and a member of the Fox News decision team who sat just a stone's throw away from me on Tuesday night as we watched them make these calls. It's a fascinating process to see how they crunch all the numbers and get to the point where they feel like, okay, we're going to go ahead and call this state. It's just phenomenal. Darren, you guys did a fantastic job.
Thank you very much, Martha.
So make your argument for the folks at home who now believe, forget the polls. You just have to figure out how many people show up at rallies across the country.
I know. Well, thanks for having me on. It's really nice to make this case. I'm not the only one making this case, Martha, but there are a few of us out there. But first, you have to do a mea culpa in some sense. I mean, look, people only really care about polls to the extent that they're predictive of something. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't pay so much attention. And so you're right. When you have in Detroit the weekend before the election. You're saying that was coincidence? Somebody showed something there that was going on.
Yeah, amazing. Darren, as I said, you guys do a fantastic job, and thank you for laying it out. It does have a lot of people sort of figuring out how it all works, and it's good to talk to you tonight. See, you're back in
Great
Washington.
to talk to you, Martha.
You made it. You hightailed it out of New York. So you thought the election was over, right? But it's still going on, because you know what just happened? The AP just called Arizona for Donald Trump. 2 days after Election Day, the president-elect will receive the state's 11 electoral votes. So it goes on, the process, and we know that Hillary Clinton's still ahead in the popular vote. So we're waiting for all of those numbers to tally in, but the news continues on the election front. And it was also a very big day on Wall Street as the Dow closed at a record high. Just 2 days ago, Donald Trump's stunning win sent the Dow into a fierce downward spiral in the early hours. But all that pretty much turned around. The NASDAQ and tech stocks, though, still, on the other hand, haven't fared as well. And we're going to find out why that is and what's going on with the economy under President Trump and what it means for you. Maria Bartiromo is here, host of Mornings with Maria and Fox Business Network's Global Markets editor. Maria, welcome.
Hey,
Great
Martha.
to see you tonight.
Thank you so much.
You know, we were together on election night. We watched this whole thing. It was plummeting. The futures were plunging 800 points overnight. And then now we're at a record high. What happened?
I never really believed it when the market was down so much. That was just a spiraling lower because of the unknown. Donald Trump was the unknown. Wall Street investors did not really know what to think of him. But very soon into it, things reversed course. And remember, we talked about it the next day when I said to you I would be buying this market with both hands. The reason was because when you actually zero in on his economic plan, it's a growth plan. And that's what drives markets. When you talk about the fact that he wants to lower taxes, a corporate tax rate of 15%, and recognize the fact that he's going to roll back regulations, taking the handcuffs off small and medium-sized businesses, you recognize that actually this plan could move the needle on economic growth. And so once investors started focusing on actually the policies that Donald Trump is bringing to the table, they recognize this is great news for companies, great news for earnings, and that is what drives markets.
I mean, during the Obama administration, you had the EPA sort of unilaterally able to slap regulations on companies and things they had to get up to speed with. You know, in some cases, some of those things are effective, but the mountain of regulation that sits on the desks of small business owners across this country has just been so you know, has had such a dampening effect to the market.
It is the reason that some small business they're unwilling to hire more than 50 employees, because they know if they hire anybody above 50, they are forced to provide health insurance and they can't afford it. So Obamacare is a huge issue, and that is why the markets are happy that Donald Trump is going to address that and relieve small business of that. By the way, I think things really started to change when it was clear that the Republicans were getting the House and Senate, because once that was clear to the markets, people were thinking, well, not only does he have a growth plan, but he will be able to get that growth plan through. We will see tax reform in 2017. We will see a rollback of regulations in 2017.
So what areas have done especially well in this market?
Well, the banks have done really well. You know, Dodd-Frank, he wants to also change, and he's got this rule that if you're going to create a new regulation, you've got to eliminate one that is already in place. And so the banks have been trading up. A lot of them hit all-time highs, actually, because of the financial services sector is one that will benefit. You also got capital goods companies, a lot of drug companies also doing well. Remember, Hillary Clinton wanted to put a cap on drug prices, so the drug stocks were trading down under the scenario that she would win.
Tell me something. The NASDAQ stocks, tech stocks have had some problems. Why is that?
Well, first of all, the technology stocks have been trading up ahead of this. So from a valuation standpoint, they were up there. But there's also a feeling out there
that we can get this country turned around and make America great again.
We just spent quite a bit of time together. I think we're going to do some absolutely spectacular things for the American people. We look forward to starting. In fact, truthfully, we can't get started fast enough. We're going to lower taxes, as you know. We're going to fix health care and make it more affordable and better. We're going to do a real job for the public, and that's what we want to do, and that's why we're excited.
Check, right? The nightly political panel is back. Shelby Holliday, senior video reporter for the Wall Street Journal, and Caitlin Huey-Burns, national political reporter for Real Clear Politics. Fascinating to watch these gentlemen sitting at the table talking about all of this. It seems that when it stays focused on policy, everybody is just relieved and much more comfortable than all the personality stuff and the mudslinging that they had to deal with during the campaign.
Well, Paul Ryan, remember, has been campaigning around the country on the Republican agenda. He spent lots of time crafting a Republican agenda and saw it as a way to campaign for Republicans without necessarily having to attach them to Donald Trump. Now he has a Republican president, a Republican-led Senate, and, of course, the Republican majority. So this is very, very welcome news for Paul Ryan. As we talked about earlier, though, there are serious policy differences between Trump and his Republican Party. Trade. Trump has also talked about not touching entitlement reform, which is something that Paul Ryan has really championed. And immigration, of course, is a key issue of tension within the party. Has been for a while, but this has been more pronounced.
But what you do is what they just said. You start with the things that you agree on, right?
Exactly.
Cutting taxes, Obamacare, regulation, those are all things that those guys will see eye to eye on, right?
Exactly. And the Democrats aren't powerless. They have enough in the Senate. They the Republicans don't have the 60-seat Senate to just start undoing Obamacare and doing whatever they want.
They need 8 Democrats, right?
They can actually start looking at some of the pieces of Obamacare, like the individual mandate, the employer mandate, subsidies, so they can start peeling it back without scrapping it all together and coming up with some sort of new transition plan. They'll do that. They'll look at immigration. Donald Trump has a lot of plans for immigration. Building a wall might not be something he will get done in the first 100 days. Paul Ryan has said, we're not paying for it, and if Mexico's not paying for it, we'll see what happens. He has said that he's in favor of a strong border and a barrier, but not necessarily
What do you think
Trump's
the build the
wall.
wall compromise ends up looking like, Caitlin?
Well, you talked to a lot of Trump supporters at his rallies. I did. A lot of them said, well, the wall is kind of more of a metaphorical kind of thing. They liked what Trump was talking about. They liked his style and approach and things to shake things up. So I think a lot of people in D.C. are hoping that that's how he'll govern. But I think one of the more interesting storylines, too, is what the Democrats do as a minority party. Do they want to embrace some opportunities to tackle some issues? Infrastructure is one of those bipartisan issues, or do they
get together on?
Make themselves an opposition party?
Kumbaya moment today. Shelby and Caitlin, thank you very much. We'll be right back. So Donald Trump's youngest son, Barron Trump, who had a front row seat there on election night, now has a unique honor. The 10-year-old will now be the youngest presidential son to live in the White House since JFK Jr. Since JFK Jr., only presidential daughters, such as Sasha and Malia Obama, have lived in the White House. Today, Melania Trump and the First Lady Michelle Obama met and discussed raising children in the White House, which is a unique situation and something that Michelle Obama knows quite a bit about. So that's it for tonight. O'Reilly is up next on The Record. Back tomorrow night.
The many challenges that we face. Most of all, I want to emphasize to you, President-elect, that we now are going to want to do everything we can to help you succeed, because if you succeed, then the country succeeds.
This was a meeting that was going to last for maybe 10, 15 minutes, and we were just going to get to know each other. We had never met each other. I have great respect. The meeting
and being so ardent in terms of their desire to see change in Washington. So he's going to need to be able to talk to President Obama and have that kind of counsel and guidance, and perhaps also talk to President Bush, while at the same time honoring what he said he was going to do about draining the swamp and making change in Washington, D.C. But at the same time, he has to be able to govern and govern effectively and put all those positions in place. It's a lot. It's an enormous responsibility.
Eric, it was kind of, I mean, that's the first time they met. How do you think it went? I mean, I don't think President Obama ever thought that was going to happen. Although a lot of people didn't.
I'm sure he didn't, because of things he said about Trump just a couple of days ago. Wow, what a moment, though. I mean, seeing Trump walk around the White House, seeing Trump on the balcony, Speaker Ryan's balcony, the Speaker's balcony, which I've been to, it's unbelievable. That view straight down, looking at the reflection pool and seeing the Washington, it's incredible. And seeing Trump there, boy, we've come a long way. It's 600 days since he announced. It was amazing. Think about this, though, for a second. The daunting task that he has in front of him. Being the outsider, I noticed that he put up a website about jobs, and he literally needs, I think they said 350 West Wing jobs in the next couple of days, getting them in place right away. 4,000 jobs, and I noticed one thing that they said: if you're a D.C. insider, if you've been through in the system, don't bother applying for these jobs. That is a daunting task for this man, but I think if anyone can do it, he'll do it. I think this was more cordial. Yeah. Nice to meet you. I know we've had our differences. And President Obama has a serious problem right here, right now. Yeah. He's got to make sure that his legacy now is somewhat intact. I mean, his policies got destroyed in prior elections. Now, as you point out, Obamacare is the only thing left with his name on it.
And the executive order.
And the executive. By the way, I think that will be the first thing Trump does. The first thing is go through the list of executive orders and just dismantle every single one of them. Sign those things off as being no longer in play. Take them out of the work. Look, it's a big moment. An hour and a half, I'm sure it was a lot like. Can you imagine the first time you walk into the Oval Office and realize that's going to be your office for at least 4 years?
Yeah, and Trump's going like. I need new drapes. I need a whole renovation. There's no gold in this chair.
Gold.
Dana, they said they talked about wonderful and difficult things. What do you think went on in there?
I would say probably there was a little bit of talking about the personal, about raising children in the spotlight. Yeah. And in the White House, and how wonderful that can be, but also how do you protect them? And I think that the Obamas have done a very good job of that. Of course, they got advice from George and Laura Bush on that as well. I imagine that what President Obama wanted to talk to him about was the importance of filling the very critical national security positions before January 20th. The reason I say that is because transitions are historically a very vulnerable time for a country. We were attacked in 1993, and then again in September 11th, which was in that first 9 months of the administration. And other countries have seen similar things, Britain, Spain, and that's why there are about 20 national security positions that must be filled with people that know what they're doing. Yeah. And so I think that President Obama probably talked to him about that. It says that he briefed him on, Josh Earnest said that Obama briefed Donald Trump on the upcoming trip he's taking to Greece, Germany, and Peru. Gives you sort of the range of things that the president has to deal with on a daily basis, but I would imagine that Obama's and Trump's most important issue was national security.
Can I throw one more thing? I know we're going to get to one, but if you remember when President Obama took over from the Bush administration, after the first security briefing, now we found out in hindsight, not right away, but after the first security briefing, President Obama was shocked at what he didn't know and what they don't know. Yeah, and he was very thankful to the Bush administration for at least working with them to get to the point where he's at least comfortable with what's going on in some of the major Is Donald Trump creating jobs from day one, the minute after he was elected, by having paid protesters get out there?
You don't even understand the depth of feeling that people have about the election.
I think I do.
People
I think
are very upset.
I think the emotions
and you
ran
suggest
high
that these
for the
people. Hang on, let me finish.
For the better part
Did
of a
I
year and a
interrupt
half,
you? Do I interrupt you every time you speak?
You
I do not.
However, I do
no.
understand the
Wait
depth of emotion that has gone on,
but
even
you
at
don't
this table.
let
Even
me speak
in
for
the
just
bill.
a
Yes, I do.
But I'm telling you, these people have genuine fears and worries about Donald Trump as president for legitimate reasons. And you shouldn't be saying, oh, they're paid. Why not suggest, hey, you know what? They're out there, they're Americans, and they're giving voice to legitimate concerns.
There was one that recommended, was wondering where the presidential assassination was, or where, when it was going to happen. You didn't see this one? I guess you maybe should, take a peek at some of the websites.
The thing that I get from this is that they actually believe they're protesting other people's votes, Dana.
Right.
I think it's like they're almost saying like this isn't fair. This Democratic vote is not fair.
Well, and of course, the losing side of the Electoral College, if you win the popular vote, though it looks apparently Donald Trump is creeping up on at least maybe even hitting that mark in terms of the popular vote. But let's just say in 2000, if you don't win the popular vote, but you win in the Electoral College, there's a lot of bitterness and a look back to say, what in the world were the founding fathers thinking when they did the Electoral
By the way, I
College?
was so proud to hear you praise President Obama in your monologue today.
Oh.
Because you know what? I mean, he acted like a champ in terms of greeting Trump and treating him as he did.
And
if
we
he
praised
hadn't,
him
you would have
yesterday.
said he's a sore loser.
No, that's an example of people getting along. I think we have a picture of President and President-elect with their spouses. Don't we have something that just came out there? Oh, it's the spouses. See you having a good time. There you go. Everybody can get along, including Eric and Juan.
So then why don't people take a cue from the president and president-elect?
President Obama was very gracious.
Yes.
Mrs. Clinton was very gracious yesterday. I hear a lot of very negative lefties all over the TV yesterday and today not being quite so gracious about Donald Trump.
Oh, no, I'm gracious, but I'm going to tell you, when you diminish people's legitimate concerns about a man with a record he has on race,
you called the
women.
President-elect a racist last night.
I think that his behavior, it's not just me. How about Paul Ryan? How about the Speaker of the House? He said, this is classic definition of racism.
Let me tell you something. There was none of that from Obama. There was none of that from Clinton.
Fine.
At least for a
Nobody ever
time
did that
being,
here about
there should be
President Obama.
a truce called on that kind of rhetoric. You want to pick it up later? Go ahead.
It's very disrespectful and it's inappropriate.
You can't ask people to shut up and close their eyes to who Donald Trump is.
All right.
And also, what about giving the man a chance? He won fair and square by a tremendous amount of votes from a variety of people,
President
minorities,
Obama do today.
women, all of the above. And wait and see, he's going to exceed your expectations.
All right. Coming up, a big chore ahead as President-elect Trump and Republicans ready their new agenda. What happens next for Obamacare and other major policies? More on that when we return.
President-elect Trump has been outspoken about erasing several Obama administration policies when he takes office, including the failure known as Obamacare. Charles Krauthammer has an interesting take on how the president played a role in Mr. Trump winning the White House.
I think what's overlooked is the role that Barack Obama did. Remember, he said 2 years ago, I'm not on the ballot, but my policies are, and he got shellacked. And then he said, this year, my legacy's on the ballot. And I think he's going to lose it. I think it's going to be undone, much of it, in the first 100 days, starting with Obamacare. He has left the Democrats in ruins at every level. He's been a wrecking ball for Democrats, and I think he deserves a lot of the credit for Trump's victory.
So what are some of the first legislative issues the president-elect should address as soon as he is sworn in? Eric, I noted earlier that, well, on
that as a segment one day because that's really interesting.
Let's do.
But I think that right now you have to talk about Trump and Republicans, and in specific, Speaker Paul Ryan, because Ryan is a guy, for example, who's all about things like, let's make some cuts to things like Social Security. Let's balance this budget. Let's get it back working, right? And what do you hear from Trump? I'll never touch Social Security. I'll never touch Medicare. I'll never touch Medicaid. And when it comes to the wall, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has said, I won't even bring up the wall. I mean, I'm not going to pay for some wall. So you have to start to think, what about a deportation force to get out all these? You know what? I think the Republicans may be like, excuse me, sir, what are you talking about? Well, should we block Muslims from coming to the country? President Trump, can we slow down? Let's talk about something.
Well, he never said he was blocking Muslims from coming to the country.
Yeah,
so now you're just making up things.
Oh, that's true.
Shocking.
What fiction?
But banned and blocked are kind of the same.
Yeah.
All right.
First thing,
what shall we do?
First thing President Trump should do, pardon Billy Bush.
From what?
How sad is it that Billy Bush lost his job and the other guy got the greatest job ever? And he's like back home in L.A. going, how did this happen? How did this happen? All I did was try to be polite and just kind of laugh along, and I'm screwed. I agree with Eric. The wall is the shiny red bicycle he promised his kid for Christmas. Yeah. If that's not under the tree, you're going to have some unhappy hombres. And I mean that America.
I know we're teasing, but the one thing that he can bring Paul Ryan into the fold, he had his issues with Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan has a replace. He has an idea to replace Obamacare.
They've been working on it for several years.
Let's do it, Paul. You're charged with replacing Obamacare, your idea. And he had, remember, before Obamacare was passed, Paul Ryan had a Republican plan for that.
Oh, and also to release the health plan that he has on the website. So, I mean, there's people got to work on it soon.
Let me say, Mitt Romney had the original plan, but I will say this. Paul Ryan says he has a plan now, but you'll notice in order to get a vote, he's reluctant because he can't get all the Republicans to agree on what should be in a replacement plan.
They might.
We'll see what happens. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think another thing President Obama may have brought up today is the Trade-Pacific Partnership, because there's a lame duck session of Congress coming up between November 18th and December 6th, and I would imagine that that President Obama tried to make the case that for geopolitical reasons, as well as economic reasons, that it's a good thing to do, and maybe would ask him to send a signal to the Republicans to pass it.
That it brought up Garland? Do you think he brought up Garland at all?
I doubt it.
Yeah. No, but one thing, Dana, just picking up on that, they've got to have some kind of spending budget bill before the end of the year.
Yes.
And I'm sure that he discussed that.
That's right. And we're probably not going to find $1 trillion for infrastructure that year, but got a year to figure it out.
Donald Trump's victory over Hillary Clinton caught the mainstream media flat-footed, resulting in a virtual panic. Maybe it's because these so-called journalists just don't understand how red America really is. Take a look at this map. It's a county-by-county analysis of how America voted, a sea of red, even more so, more coverage than Verizon, one might say. But despite the resounding win by Mr. Trump, there seems to be still some major disconnect within the media.
I have Muslim friends who are texting me tonight saying, should I leave the country? I have families of immigrants that are terrified tonight. This was a white lash. This was a white lash against a changing country. It was a white lash against a black president.
That's a pretty extraordinary thing to say. You have a son in the Marine Corps and that you don't trust the commander-in-chief. The people in the military defend the Constitution.
I think this is so ridiculous.
Democracy, Casey, we'll start with you. You know what the one stood out, and O'Reilly hit on this last night, that Martha Raddatz, although a great journalist,
very good.
reminder that she was a debate moderator and she was welling up because she couldn't bear the thought of a Donald Trump presidency.
She also denied that was true, that she said through a tweet from herself that was not true. She was not getting choked up. It was 2 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning, so who knows?
So it looked like it, right? But that's good that she addressed it to say that's not what she was saying. But I mean, I don't understand, why are people so... Okay, listen, I understand because people are passionate and they wanted to have Hillary Clinton win, but guess what? This is America. We live in a democracy. Everybody, when they woke up in the morning, is registered to vote, could go is also in the liberal media largely to blame for creating this hysteria and panic and misinformation that now the people that are upset are like, wait, but this is what we were told, because they went out of their way to demonize him and try to put bullets in him and say all of these things and hit him harder than everybody else. And that's the truth. So now there's this false perception. Well, I know you do.
Because I listened to him. And when I listen to him and hear what he had to say about women, I think, boy, that's kind of rough. I don't think that's the way that people should talk about other people. Or when I hear him, say things about black people, I think, my gosh. Or when I hear him talk about Latinos, I just think, goodness gracious.
And what about all his black and Latino supporters?
Well, I don't know what they're thinking, to be honest with you, Kimberly. But I will say this, in terms of the media, I'm stunned, at how clear they are. Like Tom Friedman says in the New York Times, he feels homeless in the America that elected Donald Trump.
And he has like 5 homes, right?
David Remnick at The New Yorker said it was a tragedy. He said this is a victory for people who like authoritarians, misogynists, and racist. In the Huffington Post, Sam Stein said this is a victory for an anti-Semite and a racist.
All right, well,
this is the same vitriol. But can I just add, this is the same
vitriol. It's just like you're trying to do a PR campaign to badmouth the president-elect, and we should show. Yeah.
No, I was quoting other people.
No, you keep wanting to say.
Just do us one favor. Control room, can you throw up that map again of the county by county with that covers at Verizon? Here's what the bottom line on that thing is. It's kind of a meme going around the internet. It's that election map, and then more coverage than Verizon. Can you hear us now? And that's really what it says. It's look at the red on that map.
But we do also know that the majority of the people live within 100 miles of the coast.
Right.
So that's why it's blue like all the way around.
And that's why Hillary Clinton.
Is that more?
You know what that means? That means they're putting something in the water.
That could be in the water.
But I've got to say, I was young, fairly young, when Reagan was elected. And in 1884, the same vitriol was there because generally liberals, in my view, are more vitriolic about politics because the politics is personal. So when Reagan was elected, they called him horrible names. Remember, he was Bedtime for Bonzo. He was just a stupid actor, a hateful person. They attached a Nazi and Hitler imagery to him, and they made it, and they did it again in '84. I just think, you know what? They're just not used.
So what happens to right-wing radio saying, "Oh, we're not going to give him a chance," or "He was born in another country. He's not really an American"?
I agree. There's polarization, but the polarization on the right side is fairly new.
They're teasing us. We got to go.
And now that the election is over, what happens to the Clinton investigation? Yesterday, the White House said it would not rule out pardoning Hillary to protect her from being prosecuted by Mr. Trump. And as you know, President-elect Trump vowed to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate Clinton if he won. Rudy Giuliani, who may be in the running for Attorney General, addressed the issue.
So you're not going to investigate Hillary Clinton if you're Attorney General?
Different story.
Oh.
You got a big choice there, and I don't know the right answer to it. There's one tradition in America, right? Election's over, we forget about it. There's another tradition in America, which is equal justice under the law. And it would depend on how bad the violations are. And there has not been a
So you'd have to take a fresh look.
Well, the FBI is still investigating the Clinton Foundation.
And Obama's going to pardon her before he leaves.
Then that will seal Obama's legacy as one of the worst presidents.
Yeah, that's a very tough position to be in, because as a former prosecutor, I think justice should be blind, regardless of who it is. But then again, they talk about the decorum of the office, Hillary Clinton's age, potential health, et cetera, et cetera. But this is one of the mandates of the campaign that he said he would investigate. But separate from all that, that a Clinton Foundation investigation is still ongoing. Why wouldn't you still continue with that?
Well, and the favorite chant at Trump rallies was "lock her up." Right. It started at the convention, and I don't know what the answer to this is either. Obviously, and it doesn't matter what I think. James Comey will make a decision at the FBI. I do.
all the other people that were involved with her. With
no,
the
I just think there's
Clinton
no real case. I mean, it's like saying Omarosa came out and said, "Oh, you know what? We've been keeping an enemies list."
Oh,
well, maybe you want to go after the enemies list. This is like getting Nixonian now.
Oh,
now I wouldn't worry about Omarosa's enemy list.
Okay.
You can't make this up. I mean, there you go.
After winning the election, President-elect Trump and his top advisors must now focus on the job of governing. And the first step is putting together a White House staff and cabinet. The transition team has launched a website, greatagain.gov, and Twitter account @transition2017 with updates on the transfer of power. So who should Mr. Trump tap for key roles in his new administration? Let me begin with you, Gregory, because you always have some innovative thinking, but I just want to tell you off the bat that lots of people are talking about Rudy Giuliani for Attorney General.
He earned it.
How about Newt Gingrich or Bob Corker for Secretary of State? Ben Carson, Surgeon General. Jeff Sessions, the senator from Alabama, going to the Pentagon.
Relied on him a lot.
What about David Clark, the Milwaukee sheriff?
Tough guy.
Security.
I would not give Chris Christie Department of Transportation. Not good with those bridges. But I think that Donald Trump should say, I can't say because maybe half of these positions may not exist. Maybe we don't need some of these jobs. That would be great. But he should give Billy Bush press secretary.
Yes.
Just to repay.
You really are his advocate.
No, Billy Bush is a nice guy.
I don't know.
He is. He's very nice. And he's a really lovely family. Great kids.
So I'm going to say something that's going to upset the audience, but I see a lot of older white males.
Well, I was just saying in the commercial break. Now, I don't know. Any of these lists, I guess, are just totally speculative and just rumors. Who knows? But the list that I have in front of me has 2 women mentioned for the entire cabinet.
And who are they?
Well, one is Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi, and also Sarah Palin. So, again, but I don't know. I don't think this list is real. A couple of things I would say. It does take about 8 weeks to get a background check completed. So, if you think there's 70 days till the administration switches, and you've got 56 days, really, or you have 2 weeks to figure out those people so that you can get those background checks done. And so that's really important. The other thing is he's got a lot of options because he didn't have that big of an inner circle, right? So he needs an outer circle. There's some great people out there that are good public servants with experience or people in business. But if you look at governors or senators and you expect to bring them on, one of the problems with that is that you leave open a hole that could be filled by a Democrat, and then that hurts your chances of furthering your agenda. I would mention one woman that I think that he should take a look at, and that is Kelly Ayotte. She's a senator from New Hampshire who just lost by about 700 votes, a handful of votes up in New Hampshire. I think she would be good at defense. Or at the Justice Department or at Homeland Security.
She's terrific.
That might make people
and she has really good relations on Capitol
Hill. Remember, she pulled her endorsement of him.
I have 2 quick questions here for you. One is about Treasury, and I hear Steve Mnuchin, who was his top fundraiser guy who used to be at Goldman Sachs, is up for that
I hear
job.
that too. Yeah.
And the second question I have for you is, what about Steve Bannon, Breitbart?
So can I address the woman issue, the female in the cabinet? Kellyanne Conway was the one who stood right by him, not early in the campaign, midway through, and she was the one who really grounded him. And Hope Hicks was there from day one. I talked about them yesterday.
Yeah,
also, you have Ivanka.
Talented.
Ivanka is one of the.
But those aren't cabinet positions.
No, I know, but they're close advisors. They can be close advisors and help pick the cabinet positions, which I would say would be more powerful than some of the cabinet positions. He's got a small circle of very close people. A lot of them are women as well. Bannon, very influential going through. Jared Kushner, very influential.
Well, I want to ask Kimberly about that.
Can I just throw you a Treasury Secretary very quick?
Can I
mention? Go ahead. Yeah, let's go.
No, I just want to get through. But I heard that Jared Kushner was being taken around today by the current White House Chief of Staff.
Yeah, by Dennis.
So what do you think?
Look, I mean, I think he's somebody that Trump relied on heavily during this election, during the campaign, especially in the closing days. He has great admiration for him. He works very well. And when President-elect Trump could not appear at certain things or meetings, he would send Jared and he would represent him very well. So who knows if it's Chief of Staff, if he would be interested in a position like that. I think, he's super talented. So
well, I think,
it also involves, them moving.
Chief of Staff, the Reince Priebus, is apparently up for that one. But it does sound like a family affair at the Trump White House. One more thing up next.